Hi there, Jonathan here. The following talk is offered freely to ensure that no one is ever denied access to these practices and to these teachings. If you feel inspired to make a donation to support this offering, you can go to my website where you can also sign up for a monthly newsletter designed to support you in your practice. That's at www.jonathanfoust.com. Thank you and enjoy. So there's someone by the name of Frank Layden, who's the Utah Jazz president and former coach. He said one time of a former player, he said, "Son, what is it with you? Is it ignorance or apathy?" And he said, "Coach, I don't know and I don't care." We can always use a little coaching in our lives. And we always have more opportunity to grow. You know, there's always an edge to explore between you and feeling more alive, more vibrant, more available for life. And one of the greatest stumbling blocks we run into is, well, there are three main ones. Through this lens of Buddhist psychology, there's greed, being caught in wanting mind, and aversion or hatred, being caught in the judging, blaming, pushing away mind. And the third poison is delusion, believing something's true when it isn't, or believing something isn't true when it is. And what I found in my life, and certainly with many people that I've run across, is that there are times in life where our goals are founded on a foundation of delusion. Like, if I do what my parents want me to do, then I'll be happy for the rest of my life. Or if I go with the safest choices in life, then I'll be okay. Or even if I dream it and think happy thoughts, it's going to happen. So I want to talk tonight about really kind of in four parts, as I usually do. The first is around the power of intention, knowing what you want, but also having the courage to change direction when you realize that what you're pursuing isn't a match. The second that goes along with intention is attention. Like, how do you pay attention to that which you want? And in particular, one particular practice, which is training yourself to restrain from habitual or unhelpful activity with awareness. Kind of the practice of not doing certain things. And third, to talk a little bit about resilience. How does resilience play into a spiritual practice and into your life? And then finally, a little bit on how to gauge your progress. How can you determine how you're doing in your practice? So there's a very interesting thing I hadn't heard about until a while ago when a friend of mine pointed this out to me, that if you ever see a cheetah chasing an animal, and the split second that when the cheetah realizes that it's not going to catch the animal, it actually skids. They actually skid on their feet, coming to a stop. And part of it is they have to conserve their energy. So they know that they only have so much energy they can expend to keep their life going. So as soon as there's that recognition of this isn't going to work, it's not like they say, well, I'll just kind of run this one out. They just stop. And can you imagine practicing that in your life? When you're recognizing something isn't life supportive, just cut it off. And I thought about this, and I have a friend, a little quirky. But she would have a dinner party for people. This happened multiple times. She would have a dinner party, and everyone would be chatting along, and then she would say, "I'm tired, you all need to go home." And the first time we all kind of chuckled, and then she said, "No, I'm tired, you need to go home." And we all just sort of packed up and and left. But I kind of admired her for that. There was another time when there was a memorial service for someone, and I was asked to play the flute, as part of the memorial. And so there are a lot of folks from a retirement community were part of this memorial. And and that's sort of like the lead up to me playing the flute. There was just some guy, old guy out there who just said, "I'm bored. I want to go home." And I thought, I want to be that guy. At some point in my life, I want to be that guy. So just imagine you're on a phone call with someone and say, this call isn't working for me anymore. Or just, this job just doesn't really vibe anymore. It's over. But it's fascinating to see how complacent we can become in our lives. Most of us tend to accept certain conditions for our safety and our comfort. Maybe you're not really crazy about your job, but you've got a mortgage to pay and it pays the bills, so you adjust. And there's some internal compromise there. Or maybe there's relationship stuff going on in your life. It's not as alive and vibrant as it could be, but it's too much work to stir the pot and to try to sort things out again. Or maybe family dynamics, that are really kind of suppressing your happiness and your vitality, but it's just too much energy to have to try to process something through with people who maybe aren't that interested in processing. So we end up tolerating a lot in our lives. When you know what you really, really want in life, it's a lot easier to make distinctions around what's a match and what isn't a match. There's a great phrase that I love, and I'll substitute one of the words. You can guess which word I'm substituting. And that is, if it isn't heck yes, it's heck no. It's a great way to make decisions. Unless it's a yes, then it's a no. It's kind of a radical practice to take on. And I've been trying to practice little things just to see, so what am I just sort of tolerating, and how can I clarify this? If it's not heck yes, then it's heck no. And one of them is, I'm not that crazy about drinking alcohol. In past years, I loved drinking beer, but I noticed I didn't feel that good with it. But then I would find I was in social situations where the easiest thing to do was to have a glass of wine or have a drink. And I just noticed that it really doesn't work for me. So I always tried the rule of, there's that rule, if you ever have an alcoholic drink twice that amount in water to kind of balance things out. But I just decided a little while ago, this really doesn't work. This is not a heck yes, so it's a heck no. And I've just noticed, I just feel better. Just that little thing of taking care of myself. It adds a little something. So an integral part of spiritual practice is called restraint with awareness. And that is to identify the things in your life that don't feed you, or maybe the things that drain you in some way, and to consciously not do those things, and to pay attention to what happens when you refrain from that habitual activity. The classic phrase, which is often used, is that when you engage in the spiritual practice, it's like you're swimming upstream. You're swimming against your conditioning, but you're also swimming against the conditioning of the culture. So it requires a little extra effort to keep a practice going, particularly when you're exploring kind of restraint with awareness. And it's a really interesting thing to look at spiritual practitioners and their lives. And the Buddha is a great example. He was called to really discover what is it that goes beyond sickness, old age, and death. He was drawn to truly, deeply want to see into the nature of reality. So he gave himself fully to that practice. And for many years of his life, he engaged into the practices of the day were practices of great austerity, of denying the body food, putting the body into really, really challenging situations. And so as he went through these practices of denial, and austerities, he developed this articulation of what's called the middle way, that is not too tight and not too loose. And we're in that balance all the time. Just as the Buddha's life archetypally was about seeing into the nature of reality, so is your life. If you're called to this practice, it will reveal to you what is real. It's inevitable. But in order to practice, it requires a certain amount of effort and a lot of diligence. Because this is not an easy practice. And again, in the archetypal life of the Buddha, there are these, beautiful stories of, before his awakening and in the recognition of reality, that he was visited by Maya, by illusion, by all these different temptations that called to him that he had to say no to in order to persevere and see clearly. And so the question always comes down to, what do you really, really want in your life? And what are you willing to give up to get it? If you really want more time with your family, what are you willing to give up in order to make that happen? If you want to be more physically fit, how willing are you to let go of what's in the way of becoming more fit, to embrace a regime that would support you? As I'm wrestling with this book, I'm constantly having to ask myself, what am I willing to sacrifice in order to make this happen? And as I talk with people who are really wanting to find a partner, a life partner, one of the questions inevitably asked is, how willing are you to put yourself out there? Are you willing to meet 25 people in order to find someone who might be a real match? And then you start going through the list. 18 down. I'm almost there. So it's a practice of actively assessing what's not feeding you and then making a change. And that can be quite powerful. So there's a nuance to the practice, of course, of how to say no to something and recognizing that it's saying yes to something else. But building resilience into your practice and into your life can be enormously helpful. And again, we all know this. Most of us here have accomplished a lot. I know a good number of you and a deep admiration for what you have accomplished in your life. And there's no way your accomplishment hasn't come without sacrifice. So you know what this is all about. Part of the question is finding balance within that, which I'll talk about in a few moments. James Clear is a writer who I've followed for a while, and I've shared some of his writing with you. And he writes about creativity and productivity and efficiency and all that stuff. He's a really, really wonderful teacher. But he's really embraced lifting weights as his spiritual practice. And it's kind of fun to hear him articulate it, because he talks about how you build momentum, and there's a certain confidence that you get, when you actually push yourself. I think I'd shared earlier how I had a number of years had a conversation with a medical doctor who had a PhD in psychoneuroimmunology. And one of the things I was struck by him was like how unbelievably physically fit he was. And he said, from all of my study, it's very, very clear to me that if you don't exercise, if you don't challenge your body, your brain assumes that you're dying. So the best thing you can do is to find some practice that you enjoy and engage into it, and always take some time to really exert yourself. Because it's when you are really applying yourself, certainly it applies physically, but any time where you're really applying yourself in life, your brain receives a message, I've got to stay strong because this is important and I'm needed. And he said all these different hormones and neuropeptides are released from the brain that are all about stimulating you into being more alive and more vital. So when my main activities are kayaking and swimming, and I always try to take 1 minute, at least 1 minute when I'm just full out. When you get that place inside where you're just really in that push. And it is an interesting thing. When I do that consistently, I can feel that confidence. There's something physiological, the confidence that I feel inside. So it can be very healthy to find goals for yourself, things that you really, really want, and then explore what it's like to call on a little bit of grit to make that happen. It can provide some very interesting elements of breakthroughs. And it can be applied on many, many different levels. It can be applied in meditation. It can be applied physically, but also creatively as well. And it's one thing that James Clear really inspired me. He decided a number of years ago he wanted to become a good writer. So he said, okay, I'm going to publish 2 articles a week for the next 3 years. And I should be a pretty good writer by then. And he's a good writer. And he really developed. And so part of his philosophy is if you want to be creative, you have to commit to producing crap. You have to commit to produce. So I got really, really inspired by that. So as you may have noticed, I produced a lot of crap. Between publishing the talks and my newsletter and photographs and a video every month, and I did a haiku every week for a year, and even this morning my newsletter copy was due, and I hadn't done the video yet, and so for a moment I thought, maybe I'll just recite that. Wait a minute, I'm talking about it tonight. This is not going to work. And so I pulled something together, and it's interesting. You'll see it later. You can evaluate, but it really pulled something out of me. So developing resilience can be very, very helpful. And a lot of this, in terms of meditation, is really expressed quite beautifully in Zen. And Zen meditation is just bare bones. You're sitting against a wall, with your eyes open. And as I've shared before, they use phrases like, meditate like your hair's on fire. Die on the cushion. So in that practice of the Aditan meditation, the sitting of strong determination, how many of us tried it? Yeah. Now I'm curious, did anyone decide pretty quickly you really, really didn't like it? You can be honest. Yeah. Did anyone find that it helped in some way? Like it may have sharpened your attention a little bit? Or you may have even found that like it was really, really hard and then something shifted and then like you sort of clicked into like a more concentrated space? So many of us want to have a meditation practice. It's like I'm realizing with the book that I'm working on, like I have joined the ranks of people who really would like to have written a book, you know? Writing it is really tough. But when you want to take on a meditation practice, it's so important to recognize that it is a brutal practice. It is a very, very challenging practice. It will challenge you tremendously to bring yourself fully present, moment to moment, no matter what the different modifications of the mind are. It's crazy. It's no wonder so few people do it. On the last retreat, I was giving a talk, and I said, to be grateful for the practice and so forth. I said, how many people do you know who would trade spaces with you right now? Okay, not very many, but still, this is a really, really wonderful experience. This is a challenging practice. There's a balance here, though, because some of us are naturally very, very focused and structured and disciplined. And some of us are really driven by the fear of failure, by the need for success, by the fear of shame, by the need to be liked. And so a lot of our drive is actually informed by fear. So sometimes it's very, very helpful to realize when that exertion is too much. Just as the Buddha discovered that all of this denial and focus has provided a lot of experiences, but it's not satisfying. It's not really liberating. You have to find what the middle way is for you. An example, this was a number of years ago. I was having a conversation with a young man, and he was struggling in his life. He had gone through a big change and wasn't sure what was next, but really, really liked him. And he had spent a couple years training for the Olympic canoeing team. His entire life was about getting on the Olympic team. And when it came time for the time trials, in order to qualify for it, he gave everything he had to his training. Worked out extra hard, did a little bit more than what his training regimen really called for. And on the day of the time trial, he was exhausted. He didn't have the core strength, and he missed getting on the team, which was a crushing thing for him. And what he realized was he had overtrained. He had not given himself the time to recover. And so this is such a perfect example of the middle way. And for him, it was just a little too much on this side. So it's very, very helpful to really determine where you are on the spectrum. Are you someone who trains and strains without recovery? Are you someone who is just naturally really, really focused and actually find it hard to step back? Or are you someone who needs structure to help you focus, to kind of stay inspired? That if you don't have structure, do you find yourself kind of getting a little bit lost? So finding the middle way here is important. There was once a story of a student who kind of challenged a meditation teacher and said, I don't know what to make of your teachings. You're so inconsistent. You'll tell one person to focus and work harder, and then the next person, you tell them to relax and go drink tea. And the teacher said, for those who overstrive, I encourage them to have tea and take a break. And for those who slump, I encourage them to sit a little straighter and to concentrate. It takes a lot of self-awareness to recognize what you need to find that place of balance. There was a time when I was in college and managing a 1,000-acre farm all through college and running a livestock operation, and I was working on a really complicated piece of equipment. Had a lot of belts and pulleys and all that stuff, and I could not for the life of me figure it out. I kept trying, and I remember very clearly, I was so angry, I was kicking the tires of the tractor, just out of frustration. Then I realized it was my meditation time. Thank God. And so I went off, I sat, at that time I was doing mantra meditation, so I did my mantra for 20 minutes, and I came back, and I could instantly saw the problem. And it took less than 10 minutes to fix the problem. And so it's this delicate balance between knowing when you need to step back and refresh and reboot, and when you really need to apply yourself. And we're all different that way. The most successful people in the world are not the smartest or the best looking. They're the ones who have grit, the ones who keep going. And it's hard. There are people who they're not half as smart or good looking as you are. And they're finding really great success out there. And the real key is intelligence. There's an interesting study that intelligence only accounts for 30% of your achievement in life. And some research says actually 30% is the upper end. It's the quality of mental toughness. So if you really, really want something, what are you willing to give up to get it? So if part of what you really, really want is to be happy, no matter what the externals, how do you gauge your progress on the spiritual path? I've always wondered that. Because as we say, when you meditate, you feel better. You feel your sadness better, your anger better, your depression better. And sometimes it's almost like the more aware we become, the more capacity we have to really feel our suffering. So how do we know that you're actually improving? And someone asked the Buddha this. They stopped him on the road. And they said, and of course, as the mythology goes, the Buddha really didn't answer questions unless you asked him 3 times. Then he was obligated to respond. So somehow someone got this question 3 times. And the Buddha said it is the lessening or the diminishment of 3 things. And there are the 3 things I'd mentioned at the beginning of the talk. The lessening of greed, or the diminishment, or the disappearance of greed, the lessening of hatred, and the lessening of delusion. And that's a very, very interesting gauge. As you've been engaged into your practice, do you feel you are perhaps a little bit less caught in that wanting, craving mind? Are you a little bit less caught in hatred, maybe a little more responsive, or maybe even just a little bit more aware of when you get activated? And are you perhaps a little bit less caught in confusion or delusion. On Saturday night, we had the 20th anniversary of IMCW, which was a really fun party at All Souls Church. And it was so interesting to see just how many people are sharing how this practice has changed their lives. And sometimes I wonder, well, how does that happen? Like, what happens in this practice that you can feel it really fundamentally changing something? And I know I've shared this phrase before, but it's so cliche, but I can never get it out of my head from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who founded Transcendental Meditation. He always talked these little sing-songy aphorisms, but he said, you water the root and enjoy the fruit. And there's really something about that. Like every time you can pause and step back and just sense a quality of non-judging awareness, something is very, very deeply watered inside. And that tightly bound sense of self, something just gets lubricated, I feel like, on the inside. And there's a little bit more space. And in that space, there's a little bit clearer seeing, where it gets a little bit more clear over time of what it is that you really want in this life. And seeing clearer and clearer what doesn't feed you. What is no longer a kind of a vibrational match in your life. And you begin to see that change over time as well. And there's something in here about finding that sense of resilience or grit that comes from a wholesome place. Not from a place of denial, but from a place of choosing something because there's just a knowing inside that it will lead you to a more wholesome, a more alive place inside of you. So when you go to West Point as a cadet, there's something called Beast Barracks, which is designed exclusively to break you down physically, emotionally, and mentally. And all the research say, no matter what your SAT scores or your leadership potential score or your physical aptitude exams, it is that resilience that is going to win out and carry you through. And so there are just a few things. Again, I'm drawing here from James Clear. And I think everything he says is very applicable to success in life, but also applying it to spiritual practice as well. So what are the keys? He says that successful athletes don't miss workouts. That successful leaders are more consistent than their peers. They review their goals and they keep working toward them. He says that artists and writers and employees who are the most successful deliver on a more consistent basis than most. They work on a schedule, not just when they feel like it. They do the most important thing first, and they stay with it. So then, again, what do you want? And what are you willing to give up? And for some, developing that sense of resilience, it can mean exercising every day without missing a day, or sitting quietly for 5 minutes every day consistently, or calling a friend every Saturday just to catch up and reconnect, or to spend an hour doing something creative every day. Part of it, too, is about creating small wins. Just the small things that can make a difference. And because I'm always experimenting for myself with my practice and trying different things on, I became really enamored with this whole concept of the minimum effective dose. Like, what's the smallest amount you can do to get the maximum effect? This is something Tim Ferriss talks about. And so, because I tend to overdo, I tend to set goals that are really, really big and then end up getting frustrated. So I thought, well, let me do the minimum. So in terms of playing my flute, I made a commitment that I would play every day, but it didn't matter how long. And there were some times, actually quite a few times, where I'd lie down in bed and I go like, oh no. So I'd get up, go to my office, play one note, come back and go to bed. I decided I was going to write every day, but it didn't matter how many words. And I was going to swim every other day, but it didn't matter how many minutes. And what this did for me was it actually started to create habits. Because I found that if I just go in with the permission to swim for 10 minutes, and that would become 15 or that would become 20. And that's my greatest trick with yoga. As many of you know, I hate yoga. Wake up every morning with the thought, I should do some yoga, followed immediately by, I hate yoga. But when I make myself do it 3 minutes in, I'm thinking, I love yoga. I should do this every day. So 7 minutes. That's my 7-minute yoga. And a lot of times, 7 minutes and I'm done. But sometimes 7 minutes goes to 20, it goes to half an hour. So as you explore in your own assessment, to really assess what are the activities that feed you, that grow you, that really enliven you, what are the activities that really don't do that? What would it be like to restrain from those activities? And notice what might happen when you try that on. A friend of mine wrote a little story, and we'll end with this. She said, it started on Sunday night and it ended on Tuesday morning. I put gone fishing messages on my email. I turned off notifications, and for 36 hours I didn't open my computer. I've never done this. It's not because I'm so busy and so important that I have so many things I need to do. It's because I'm hooked on zipping around on my laptop, checking this, clicking that, tapping over here and there. It's an incredible tool. I go to it for all kinds of stuff, and sometimes I go to it to avoid all kinds of stuff. But as it's been said, it's a good servant and a bad master. And no question, the dynamic had crept from me using my computer to blatantly needing it. So in an effort to change the dynamic and place the power back in my hands, I gave myself a day and a half, 2 sunrises and 1 sunset of computerless time. And boy, did I crave my email, my ability to read this article and share that one, that great productive sound of typing. But I also felt empowered and untethered. I had these brief points at a coffee shop, walking in the noontime sun, eating spring rolls, where I was in a fuller, wider state of presence. My whole mind seemed to be available for what was happening, and I felt more spacious. The 36 hours is up. I'm back with my computer. But I've got some questions I plan to ask myself every so often as it relates to my computer, phone, any of the material things I own. Where is the power? Where do I want the power to be? Or perhaps another litmus test. Could I go without this for 2 sunrises and 1 sunset? That's from Katie Whalen, who's something called the Lightning Notes, a little essay she writes. So why don't we close our eyes, but before we do, I want to thank you for restraining yourself from racing out to get those cookies, which are going to be waiting for you. So just to feel the power you built inside yourself, you can close your eyes. Take a moment to feel the breath. You might sense these two qualities of moving toward that which enlivens you, moving toward that which illuminates you, that empowers you. And being aware of those things, small or large, where you leak a little energy. The habits that hold you back from feeling more alive. And sensing this balance. Of actively moving toward that which is wholesome, and its inquiry to restraining from that which holds you from full aliveness. And in these final moments, is there one thing that you might take on as a restraint, as a personal practice? And if you were to do that, what might most support you? Is there a friend you might enroll? Someone who might practice with you? As you're ready, you can deepen the breath. And when you're ready, you can let your eyes open. Thank you for your kind attention and for coming out tonight. A few announcements. First of all, there are cookies out there. Hold yourself back for just a minute. I want to say a few words about the Mindful Dialogue group, the discussion group that occurs after class. It's a really, really cool happening. And maybe you can grab a cup of tea and and a cookie, and you'll meet right across from the restrooms over there. And thank you so much again for hosting this. Sounds wonderful. If you'd like to join the Dharma book club, it's a great way to connect with other people. There's an announcement in the newsletter. Again, reminder of the yoga beforehand. How many went to yoga? It was awesome. I heard it was really, really good. Yeah. Daniel, if you're here, thank you. Great to have you here. Thanks for bringing yourself here. Also, I am refreshing Dharma topics. I run out of topics. So if there's anything you would like for me to explore, to talk about, please email me. I'd be really interested in what you might like to hear about. And as always, your generous support is really helpful here for the class, for IMCW, and of course for